everyone, and welcome back to Quest for 10. I'm your host Spencer from Constructive Criticism, and I am back to talk about blue-red drakes and my hashtag Quest for 10. Hashtag Quest for 10 is this current series that we're doing. It's a challenge to everybody to try and get 10 wins with every major deck in given formats. This week, we're once again talking about Standard, and blue-red drakes is a deck that started to do really well at the end of this Standard format. The Standard format's almost over. In fact, this week, we have the new set dropping on MTG Arena. But I wasn't going to just kind of go into the new format. I wanted to get this under my belt, get this started before the new cards came out. So we did Jeskai Control. Now we're doing Blue-Red Dragons. And I want to go over the deck list really quick. So we have 3 Dive Down, 7 Island, 6 Mountain, 4 Lava Coil, 1 Beacon Bolt, 3 Enigma Drake, 1 Ral, Izzet Viceroy, 2 Niv Mizzet, Perrin. I don't know if I'm saying that card right. I don't know. We have 4 Crackling Drake, 4 Opt, 4 Steam Vents, 4 Soul Falls, 4 Shock, 4 Charter Course, 4 Discovery Dispersal, 1 Dragon Skull Summit, 1 Spell Pierce, 2 Treasure Map. In the sideboard, we have 2 Negate, 2 Disdainful Stroke, 1 more Ral, 1 more Niv, 2 more Treasure Map, 2 Fiery Cannonade, 4 Raptor Hatchling. That's a word that we should say correctly. And then 1 Beacon Bolt. So, in the Quest for 10, the goal is to get 10 wins with the deck. It doesn't matter how long it takes you. You're trying to get 10 wins to really start to get an understanding for the deck. This time, we happen to go 10-1 in matches finished. We actually had a match that we didn't get to finish because Arena crashed on us. We were playing against like a mill deck. It was really weird. But in games that we got to play, in matches that we got to play, we went 10-1. We played against Green-Black 3 times. We played against Blue-Red Phoenix once. We played against the Mirror once. We played against Mono-Red once. And then we played against some interesting stuff this time. We played against Red-Black Burn, Abzan mid-range. This was really just Green-Black. I think it was just splashing the White Angel. We played against what I thought was a Mirror until they started taking extra turns and played a Sunbird's Invocation that we almost lost to, and a Blue-Red Niv taking turns deck. We played against Bantfog, and then we played against Grixis Dragons, which was basically the Mirror just playing discard spells and playing Niv Mizzet, or not Niv Mizzet, Nicol Bolas. So we played against a variety of decks. We played against Green-Black a ton, and we learned quite a bit. So the point of this deck, in its essence, is really going to be that you want to pressure your opponent with Drakes and Dragons while interacting with them. And you interact with them in different ways, whether it's Shock and Lava Coil or Beacon Bolt, or whether it's Spell Pierce or interacting with their spells with Dive Down. You're trying to be more mana efficient than your opponent by playing huge threats, right? Like Enigma Drake and Crackling Drake, they have this really high power amount when you play them because your deck is just a bunch of spells. And because of that, on rate, your cards are better than your opponent's. And so you protect them with cards like Dive Down and Spell Pierce that are also on rate above your opponent's, including Negate and Disdainful Stroke out of the sideboard. So that's kind of your whole game plan. And then the other sub-game plan that this deck has is it plays a Treasure Map, it flips it, and then it plays Niv Mizzet really early with Dive Down protection, and you kind of just usually win the game from there. This deck surprised me a lot. I did not think that this 22 land, 7 mana deck was going to be this thing that I would fall in love with. But it actually did. First of all, Crackling Drake is becoming one of my favorite standard cards in a long time. I really enjoy playing with the card. I think that I wouldn't give up having to play this card now for anything. Like, this is legitimately one of my favorite cards of all time. There were games that I won where all I did was play it, kill their thing, play a Drake, and my opponent just couldn't deal with that. And, that's powerful. Being able to go Drake into Drake, attack, and win games out of nowhere against some of these slower decks, that's really cool. And something that I didn't appreciate about, I think that one of the things that I didn't like about the Phoenix deck is that I never felt like it had a real identity. Were you a combo deck? Were you an aggro deck? Were you a control deck? And it played all kinds of cards that kind of mishmash that I personally didn't like. I did not have that feeling with this deck. I always felt like I knew what my role was supposed to be, and I could play to that role accordingly. And that's something really powerful in Magic. Knowing your role and being able to play accordingly to that role is going to give you an advantage. It's going to help you win matches of Magic. And I always felt like I knew that with this deck. So it was really fun for me to do that. So I think the key cards to talking about in this deck are, first of all, there was a difference in the list that I played. I played 2 leagues plus a match. So I got 2 wins with kind of some differences. One of them was less Enigma Drakes and treasure maps over Search for Escanta. And I think that I actually liked that a lot. So when in between matches, in between events that I played with this deck, one of the things that I did is I kind of looked at other people, what they were doing with Drake decks, to see if it lined up to the things that I was learning. And one of the things that I had said, I think at the end of the stream, the first one that I did was, man, I wonder if these Search for Escantas should just be those treasure maps. And maybe I get to open up sideboard options, things like that. And I think that really held true when I was reading stuff from other people, is they also just wanted treasure map in the main deck over Search for Escanta. Because turn 2 treasure map was one of, if not the best things that you could be doing in the deck. The other thing is, I don't think that you needed 4 Enigma Drakes. While Enigma Drake and your Drake draws were really powerful and something that we already talked about, I worried that it just didn't do enough. And so for that reason, I cut down on one for, it might have just been the 4th Lava Coil. And I really liked that change. I really liked all the changes that I made to the deck, and this is the list that I would play going forward. The other kind of key card to talk about, I think, is Spell Pierce. I think this card is one of the best cards in Standard. I don't know the correct number to play them. I don't know what decks want it, but being able to Spell Pierce a 5-mana Planeswalker, or even a treasure map, or a Search for Escanta, these things, when you're on the play or the draw, is really, really powerful, and it completely changes the tempo of the game when you have that in your main deck. And I think that it won me more games than anything but maybe Niv Mizzet. Next, I kind of want to talk about the worst card. And when I say the worst card, I'm not even saying that this card is bad. In fact, I don't think this card is bad, and I think that you want some of them in your deck. But I think it's Enigma Drake. I think that there are matchups where Enigma Drake just doesn't matter. You're a control deck 100%, and you don't really need it. That being said, it having a big butt and just being able to close out games for you is really valuable in basically every matchup. It being a cheap threat is really good, so it's not a bad card. It's just the card that I was really happy that I cut down on 3 of, and it wasn't something that I needed all the time. I think my biggest takeaway from this deck was 3 things. Number 1, that you're a control deck. Number 2, your sub-combo game plan. And number 3, the Niv Mizzet mirror. So, let's start with the control deck aspect. This deck is a control deck. Now, it can have games where that's not its role. But I think in its essence, what you're trying to do is control the board until you get to the point where you can either attack them a couple times with a Drake or go off with a Niv Mizzet. And that's it. That's your whole game plan. So if you've ever played something like Kessig Wolf Run or some of the Volokit decks in Modern, a lot of the times you have these games where instead of just being this regular ramp deck, you're a control deck. And there are games like that with this deck. There are games where you're a ramp deck. Your ramp is treasure map. You have a treasure map in play. You're going to treasure map every turn. And then you have a sub-combo game plan of treasure map plus dive down and Niv Mizzet to kind of go off. And I think that if you look at my Google Docs, if you're one of the patrons, you'll actually see some of that. Now, that being said, most games don't play out like that. You're going to beacon bolt something, you're going to lava coil something, you're going to draw a bunch of extra cards to get to the things that you need. You're going to trade off your resources, and then you're going to win the game after you have more resources than your opponent, after you've controlled the game to that point. And one of the things that people think of when they think of control decks is these straight up, I'm just going to counter your stuff and play Teferi deck. Not all control decks play like that. This deck knows its role, and it knows it is not the beatdown. And the games where it is the beatdown, it's usually abundantly obvious. You've played a Drake, you've played another Drake, you have 3 things in your graveyard, you're going to have 5 in the next 2 turns, and your opponent's on a 3-turn clock. And you have Dive Down or Spell Pierce and things to protect those Drakes so that you can effectively beat down. And other than that, you're just a control deck. That combo game plan that we talked about is that Niv Mizzet treasure map plan. There are a lot of games where you're going to board in up to 4 treasure maps, another Niv Mizzet, and that's your whole plan. You got Negate, you got a Stateful Stroke, that's what you're trying to do. That's a really good game plan, and it beats so many of the decks, as we saw at the Grand Prix when we saw the Jeskai control Niv Mizzet version of this deck in the hands of Adrian Sullivan. So with that being said, I think that the last thing to talk about is the Niv Mirror. I won every single Niv Mirror that I played. I don't quite think that my opponents quite understood how this was going to play out, and if you read my notes, some of the things that would happen is my opponent would target my Niv first, and I was like, oh, that's how we're going to play this. And then I knew to kill their Niv with backup with something like a Lava Coil or a Beacon Bolt with maybe something like a Spell Pierce or a Disdainful Stroke. And pretty often what would happen is they would tap out for their own Niv, and then when we started drawing cards, target my Niv. And it's like, well, I have all the mana, so I'm favored in this transaction. So once you both have a Niv Mizzet in play, I think the truth is it's correct to never blink first. I'm not going to cast spells to try and kill your Niv. Now, one of the biggest problems with that is most of your removal is sorcery speed, right? So if I have a Lava Coil or a Beacon Bolt, I need to do that during my turn to try and kill your Niv. And so unless you have something like a Spell Pierce or a Negate for something like their Dive Down, it gets kind of tricky, and it's a really important part of the game to try and solve that puzzle to figure out how you can make your Niv Mizzet the Niv Mizzet that survives. The other thing to think about is the number of Ralzeriks that you play. So Izzet Viceroy is a card that can just come down, kill their Niv, no problem. They don't get to draw a card off of it when you cast the card. So it's like a free kill, but you still have to worry about some of those Spell Pierce Dive Down interactions. With that being said, this is the deck that I would recommend if you're just grinding right now. You got another week until the new set comes out, and then also this is a deck that I would look at adding Grixis, seeing if there is a Grixis Dragons deck that could play this. If my opponent didn't have tap lands, they probably would have been favored against me at the end of this run that I did, and that's really good. Like, the amount that Sarkhan was good, I was like, oh man, like this is definitely something that I'd be willing to try. So if you're also just looking to figure out, like, is this something that I can be doing with something like a new style of a deck with a new set coming out, absolutely. I think Niv Mizzet plus Dive Down is going to continue to be good with Treasure Map, and there are plenty of other options and other color combinations that we're going to have access to now. So that being said, 10-1, I got my 10 wins with this deck. This deck was very good. I wish that I had played more with it in Standard, but it's something that I will be trying to expand upon when the next set comes out, because I don't think that this deck is going to lose to too much stuff. You know, if there's a ton of creature decks, this deck gains a lot of value, right? When your Shocks and your Lava Coils and your Beacon Bolts get better, this deck also improves. So with that being said, thank you everybody so much for watching. Don't forget to check out the Trophy Mages at patreon.com/the Trophy Mages, as well as patreon.com/ccmtgs to support this content directly. Thank you to everybody who's been supporting me during the quest for 10. It's been fun to talk to people about the decks. When the new set drops, the plan is to kind of take a break from this, so I'll do maybe a different video, or maybe we'll do an update on the quest for 10 and how we're feeling about it, something like that. And then once the format starts to shape up, I will make a list of decks for people to test against or people to play with in their quest for 10 so that you can play along at home. So thank you everybody so much for watching, and we'll see you guys all next week with another video on the Constructive Criticism YouTube channel.